Okay, I'd like to call to
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Young, are you present? Councillor Young? Councillor Hawkins? Councillor Stevens? I'm thinking we need to check something. Councillor Young?
Yes.
Councillor Hawkins?
Present.
Councillor Stevens?
I'm here.
Councillor Bresciani?
Yes, here.
Councillor Findura?
Present.
Councillor Murray is here in the chambers. Councillor Bryce?
Yes.
Councillor O'Donnell?
I'm here.
Councillor Flagel?
Yes.
Mayor Fougere is here in the chambers, as is Councillor Mancinelli. Everyone's present. Mr. Chair?
Thank you. With that, if I could get a motion for the approval of the public agenda, adding a communication from Dream Development from Jason Carlson.
Andrew, so moved.
Thanks. Anyone opposed? There it goes. Motion for the adoption of the minutes from the meeting held on September 16th, 2020. Councillor Murray, thank you. Anyone opposed? Okay. And I guess first up, we have a delegation, Steve Ebergall from Regina and Home Builders Association. Oh, I guess we have to move to reporting first. I'm sorry. Did I put it on the table?
No, just get
Right, okay.
Just, yeah.
Haven't sat in the chair for a while. Hi, Mr. Ebergall. Thanks for appearing today. Go ahead and present your presentation.
The Regina Region Home Builders Association would like to thank Diana Hallrick and her team in the City Planning and Community Development Division for their work and recommendation on the 2021 Service Agreement Fee SAF rate. This new rate is a significant step in ensuring the City of Regina is competitive in residential, commercial, and industrial development, which is necessary if we are going to attract the type of investment that will keep our great city growing. The recommended SAF rate of $299,000 per hectare for Regina and commercial lands and $99,670 a hectare for industrial zone lands provides security and balance, which will help to protect the long-term interests of the city. We believe the proposed rate structure aligns with the OCP and the overall goal to develop complete communities and protect affordability for young families, newcomers, and individuals who call Regina home. The 16.9% rate decrease from 2020 to 2021 validates the SAF model works. Reevaluating infrastructure projects and their costs should result in a more realistic costing model. Road construction costs have been dropped significantly, and we are seeing major projects come in at 50% of the budget held in the SAF project list. Additionally, the rate decreases because it reflects new information contained in the infrastructure master plans. It assumes grant funding from other levels of specific major community initiatives based on historical grant approvals, and it recognizes that major infrastructure projects provide benefit beyond the 25-year growth horizon. These are all items, except for the decrease in construction costs, that we knew as weaknesses in the model in 2015. And through continued work, we are pleased to see the city incorporate these improvements. The reduction is important and timely as the new housing sector continues to struggle to adjust to economic uncertainties. Changes to qualifying clients for mortgages, increased costs from the implementation of the National Building Code and PST changes. These factors have conspired in 2019 and 2020 to create the largest slowdown in the new home market since the mid-90s. In addition, we've seen a loss of thousands of direct and indirect jobs in the residential construction sector. Economic Development Regina describes Regina as a city where you are free to be whoever you want to be, where you can be inspired to pursue your dreams and to find success in every aspect of your life. A significant component in achieving this has been the growth of our city over the last decade. We are now at the point where growth in our community and in our sector can no longer be taken for granted. We require policy development that encourages smarter growth in a transparent manner and promotes investment in our great city. We look forward to the completion of the SAF policy review and the opportunity to continue to improve the SAF model. The Regina and Region Home Builders Association supports this recommendation by the City Administration, and we encourage City Council to support the recommendation. And I'm free here for questions.
Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Niebergall. Are there any questions? Councillor Bresciani.
Thank you, Mr. Niebergall, for coming forward. Sorry, I'm hearing some feedback, but I just want to know, how do we, I guess, ensure that the reduction gets passed on to the consumers? So, an example, a developer, the large developers own the land, they sell it then to the home builder then, because we've seen where we just talked about not too long ago where we reduced the size of the lots, so now we've got really tiny lots, and because it wasn't, people couldn't afford it, now we're saying, going back and saying we're going to reduce it now. So how do we ensure that that is carried forward to the purchaser down the way through the chair?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councillor. I mean, the reality in a capitalist market, which we all operate in, competitive pressures, really do, and market pressures really do manage that component of it. When buyers are unable to afford those particular costs, they buy less homes, right? If in the marketplace. And we've certainly seen that over the past couple of years, where the price of new homes has been exceptionally flat, and in fact have decreased at some levels. But at the very same time, there are other components that factor into the cost of a home. As an example, just this year, from June till now, the price of lumber has gone up by 80% as a result of COVID. So while there are pieces that are decreasing the prices of a home, there's also things that are increasing the prices of the home. At the other same time, these particular reductions, like the one we saw, from 2019 to 2020, and then again this recommendation going into 2021, those are really impacting the prices of future lots. So, by making this decision today, a lot, that's for sale tomorrow in the marketplace is not going to decrease in price. This is going to impact prices that are probably a year or more down the road. Again, the cost of the home is made up of many components. And land is one of those components, and so anything that's going to put upward pressure on the price of a home is going to increase the price. Competitive pressures will also reduce the price of a home when those are reduced. And kind of lastly, to provide some evidence of this point, over the last decade, and I've mentioned this many times to previous councils, we've conducted here in partnership with the University of Regina, the cost of construction studies. And what we have seen in those studies, and they started off looking at homes from 2006 right through to 2018. And they're very consistent with studies that have been done in the United States. And it does show the margins that happen on a home, stay actually fairly relative to the market, and so that shows over the long haul. And in fact, right now, what we were experiencing in the last report that we had done, that looked at 2018, the margins already then for the industry were the lowest that they had been in all of those particular reports. And again, that's because the pressure of a slower market, that's had that impact. I don't know. It's a long answer. Hopefully I've answered that in some way.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Through the chair, I guess the bigger question is right now. I understand that the market right now is really good for home builders. I understand that housing is going really well. Some home builders are looking for more lots. So why the timing again right now for this, through the chair, is recommended?
Yeah, so there is certainly a misconception in the marketplace right now by both the public and by others that our market is doing very well. I just shared this statistic at the press release on Monday on the municipal benchmark study that our association has been around since 1955. This is our 65th birthday as an association. And so we've tracked the average housing starts in Regina over that whole period of time. And even with what appears to be a better year this year, because we will probably end up between 600 and 700 housing starts, we are well below the 5-year average, well below the 10-year average, and the 65-year average is 1,335 housing starts a year. So, last year was the worst year for housing starts since 1996. And so the fact that we are, have had an increase from the worst year in a few decades has again been captured that the housing market is doing quite well. But we really are still, well, almost half of what, would be considered a healthy market in Regina.
Okay. Through the chair, thank you. Mr. Neighbourgill, do you think that reducing the service agreement fees should affect also and should be considered that the density also be lowered? Right now we have the 50 per person per hectare. We've heard and we've had some come to council as well asking to change from higher density, now wanting to go to single family homes or maybe still on a smaller lot, but more of a single family home people are wanting that. Is that something that when we're looking at this, we should also be considering density down the way? Through the chair.
Yeah, again, another great question there. I really believe that's a great question to also ask the administration as we are going into which we're in, consultations right now with the city administration on the SAF policy review that's going on right now. It's a really important question. And, the market is providing very different, how can I say this, different information or different trends right now. There is no doubt through this COVID crisis, it's a North American trend that, as a response to, I believe, people having to spend a lot of times in their homes, they are really questioning their housing choices at this particular time. So there has been, an uptick in home buying. There's certainly been an uptick in renovations, and we are seeing, across North America, the aspiration to single detached housing, continuing to grow. And, in large urban centers across Canada and the United States, people are, especially because of telecommuting and teleworking, willing to drive farther and farther to be able to access lower cost single detached housing. So, I think it's a really important question that, our city needs to really consider in the future, how we fit into that particular trend, and what do, people in Regina, newcomers and future citizens, aspire to. And it's also a balance, that has to be determined in the question between greenfield and infill. The 70-30 split identified in the OCP certainly, is impacted by that particular discussion. And, so it is about trying to find that right balance and also looking at the market and saying, okay, yes, what is the market asking for? Again, very long-winded question to I think what could have been a simple answer. But yes, we need to have good discussion about what the density thresholds are.
Yeah. And the last question I do have for you, and this is something you've been around a long time, and looking at these service agreement fees going up and down, I guess the question I have is, and the concern is, how do you properly plan when that one time they were 360, then they went to 401, they were just at 441, and now we're going down to 299. I guess with those numbers, some projects are going to be sacrificed, or we're going to be loss of dollars. Again, would you not recommend or if it's done in other cities, that there be, for at least, a length of time so we can plan properly, that there be a certain amount set to service agreement fees?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that, again, another important question. I think there's no doubt that, our industry is looking for more stability, on the fees, to your very point. Again, that is what should be accomplished through the, SAF policy review that's underway right now, that, will end up setting the 2022 rate. And, we're really hoping out of that policy discussion and out of that policy outcomes, that's where we will actually see some stability. The interesting about this particular rate this year is that the policy actually hasn't changed that set the new rate. What certainly did occur was a much more realistic look at the project list on, the different factors I had mentioned. And I think, the city administration can also speak to that very well. That right now this is a formula. When you put in these particular projects and you cost them out in this particular way, and you run it through the formula, the 299 rate is where you come up with. And in the policy review, if that's coming up, if the policy isn't changing at all, we would actually have stability at this particular rate. The challenge was in the previous rates, there was overestimation on, many projects because they hadn't been fine-tuned as well as they are today. They didn't consider, in the same way, other sources of funding on some of these particular projects. And again, the cost of, and some of these projects that really go long-term, well past this growth horizon, were being fully captured in one growth horizon. And so what that's really doing, purely by example here, or by analogy here, it's asking people today to be bearing the cost of growth when we were, say, approaching 400,000 people. So it's framed this out a little bit more equitably this way, but it's actually not a policy change. It's really just, how the projects are calculated. And so, and that's all done within the confines of the current Planning and Development Act. So it kind of sets, right now, based on the policy, it kind of sets the rate where the rate is at. And to a certain degree, how the industry or anybody feels about it almost becomes a little bit immaterial because that's the calculation it comes to.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'll let others ask questions, but thank you very much for your responses.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Niebergall. I have two questions. The first is the briefing note which we received notes the decrease of 17.2%, and then it goes on to say the following. Much of this decrease is due to a comprehensive review of transportation projects in response to concerns raised last year by the development industry regarding the assumptions used to identify the projects and the estimated project costs. I'm wondering if you can comment on the concerns that the development industry raised and the fact that much of the decrease is due to transportation projects.
Yeah, without getting into, I'll let the administration, speak more to the specific projects that could have been fallen into that category. But I would say this is, part of this is the slowing, certainly of the market. Road construction costs, as an example, have dropped significantly. The quotes coming in by developers and for the city have been reduced. So it just costs less to build those projects. And then again, the other factor was certainly again related to I believe some of the funding sources from other levels of government, and then kind of the bigger piece is again where do these costs get allocated between the model right now is designed to take us to and to fund those projects to a population of 310,000 people. And, many of those projects go the capacity goes well beyond that 310,000 people. And so it is an allocation or an understanding of that in the model to allocate those, at the appropriate timing. I hope I've got that right, and certainly the city administration can correct me if I've got any of that wrong.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Mr. Chair, through you, I have one other question. One of the goals in the official city plan is that we increase infill and encourage housing, particularly in the downtown area. What does this set of fees, how does it help or not help in that connection? What does the Home Builders Association have to say about increasing infill housing, particularly downtown?
Yeah, we've always, since the Design Regina exercise and the OCP, have always supported the 70-30 split. We've always felt that is a good balance for this, for our community, to be able to grow up and out, at the same time, and to ensure that the pressures that happen in the market between, these two spaces stay very, very balanced. There is no doubt if you look at the infill percentage, over the last several years, it has only been declining. Certainly, some of that is market pressure, but our perspective is there just continues to be so many obstacles and risks, that prevent the residential construction industry from really investing in infill and intensification projects within the existing, city footprint. And, those issues are complex and they are numerous, and we hope that once we can, get through this SAF policy review, the larger policy review, we can certainly start to, really focus in on, this particular piece and work with the city administration to be able to get policies in place that certainly would make these type of projects in the infill, much more able to, be much more attractive for that type of investment. Again, I think the issues related to these are very complex, much more than a greenfield lot. And again, if you imagine you're a builder and you want to make an investment, and it doesn't matter whether you're building a single detached house or thinking about a collection of multi-unit houses. The advantage in greenfield is that you can go out, the land's already zoned for the most part. You can go out and buy that piece of land. You still got to go through somewhat of approval process, but then at the end of the day, you can get busy and you can get building and get that investment in place. when it comes to building inside the city footprint, there's a whole bunch of more complexity to it. A lot of that has to do with citizens, around that development, how they feel about it, the overlapping of different policies, and certainly the intensification levy, which is part of this model, is absolutely a piece of that. We had provided the administration earlier this year a piece that our infill working committee has put together that we think provides a lot of answers and a lot of solutions in the future, to this particular question, and hopefully there's a future opportunity to share that perspective, with council.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's an important answer, Mr. Niebergall. I just want to follow up by asking, in your opinion, is the intensification levy so high that it's discouraging unnecessarily intensification development downtown?
Yeah, again, I wouldn't want to paint that. I wouldn't want to paint the intensification levy as the primary reason intensification is not happening. It is certainly an aspect and an important aspect in that piece. Again, there's just a myriad of landmines for people to make those particular investments, and the intensification levy is certainly one of those. If the intensification levy wasn't there, that would certainly remove one of those roadblocks. But it's not the primary decision. Why people are investing in infill or not, but it certainly is a factor.
Thank you. I'm encouraged to hear that you're discussing this with the administration, all aspects. I think it's very important. Thank you for your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next up, we have Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Stu, for coming and spending time with us today. My question is around something you mentioned, which is smart growth that's on the horizon. And as you know, this council has committed to being a sustainable city in the future, and we want to start as soon as possible. So could you make any comments about what smart growth in the future will do to costs, and whether that will be part of the policy review discussions coming forward?
Yeah, and I do have to really clarify a difference here between, and again, I'm getting a bit technical here, but there is a difference between smart growth, which is the more common urban planning term, and I'm not an urban planner, just for clarity there, and what we refer to as smarter growth. If you look at what smart growth is, it really contains a whole lot of perspectives around, which are very, very positive, around intensification, higher densities, and space making within a community. But what it really does in most cases is creates a fairly strict urban containment boundary around a community. And so, what you will find very common in cities that have, strong smart growth policies, you will certainly achieve certain densities and certainly some sustainable benefits to that. At the very same time, most of those cities have some of the most unaffordable housing in the world. We refer to it as smarter growth, and in fact, we created a whole website here in Regina to put this into context, called smartergrowthregina.ca, that anybody in the community, including council, can reference, and the city administration to really share our perspectives on it. And it is about smarter growth is about the ability to, as I mentioned earlier, to grow up and out at the same time. And Regina is very well positioned to do this. And it goes back to this 70-30 split that is embedded in the OCP. It's really a very good balance to accomplish all of those particular goals. And, that we believe leads to certainly a high level of sustainability. The reality is the new neighborhoods that are being built right now, like the city's own towns or Eastbrook on the east side of the city, or Westera on the west side of the city, these are achieving some of the most sustainable developments that the city will have in its current form, because the densities are significantly higher, and because all of those new homes are built to the latest building code. The efficiency of those homes are far greater than what you would see in much of the existing city footprint. So, I think we're on track for that. That is, very well, and I think the OCP and this balance is actually achieving those particular goals. Again, the challenge where we're probably not making the progress we should be, it really is related to trying to resolve the infill and intensification in the existing city's footprint. That's probably where the opportunity is to look at this through a different lens.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry about that. If I could get someone, I see no other speakers. Any other questions? Mayor Fougere.
No questions of the delegation, just...
Okay, with no other questions, I'll call for a mover, and I guess that will be Mayor Fougere.
I imagine the administration wants to have a discussion first, so a bit of a briefing for council, then I would like to speak after that. Thank you.
Sounds good. Administration? Ms. Harlick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today, administration is bringing forward the servicing agreement fee report and annual rate review. The city is governed by the Planning and Development Act, which dictates what kinds of costs can be charged as servicing agreement fees. And as per the SAF policy approved by Council in 2015, we have conducted our annual rate review. This is the city's primary tool to fund system upgrades, is through the SAF in new subdivisions. Development levies are in areas where no subdivision is occurring, but a change in intensity of use is taking place, and the intensification levy is within established areas where there's an intensification of use, generating an increase in demand for the services. So as I indicated, the policy is governed by the Planning and Development Act, and it's very prescriptive of what and how these fees can be calculated. The Act allows for the following categories of growth-related capital costs to be eligible for servicing agreement fees, development levies, and the intensification funding. So that's roads and transportation infrastructure, utility infrastructure, including water, wastewater, and storm water, so drainage, and parks and recreation infrastructure. These projects cannot include associated operation costs, maintenance, or renewal of the infrastructure, nor can they be used for other growth-related costs such as police, transit, landfill, libraries, or fire halls. So that's a very important piece of information about when we bring these forward and why the rates go up and down. They are looked at on an annual basis, and as Mr. Niebergall indicated, we look at the project lists, which are the eligible projects, and we do calculate what is the benefit to the growth areas, but sometimes there's benefits to the existing population. So when we look at the costs of those projects, there's different splits, and we use that to determine who's benefiting and who should pay for those costs, because there's only really two ways that get paid. It's either through these fees or taxpayer funded. So that's how we look at each of the projects as we go forward. When we did the review this year, as Mr. Niebergall indicated and Councillor Hawkins noted in the report, the transportation costs are the substantial portion of all of the costs to get us to the 300,000 population. What we did this year is we looked at all of the projects. We took in factors such as, does this piece of infrastructure actually go beyond this growth horizon? Does it help, and will it need to be paid by the next growth horizon? So we took that into consideration when we were looking at the projects and doing the splits. And also we looked at what construction costs are and what we were seeing, and we applied a factor to that. Because the model is it's a large time frame, sometimes it is an estimate of what we're going to be paying into the future. And so we looked at that and took some liberties in saying that we don't exactly know how much it's going to cost in 25 years or 23 years. And so we gave a reduction in some of those costs, and taking into account the construction costs for our current construction, like immediate construction horizon, which is like the 5-year horizon. So taking all that into consideration, the other thing different that we did this year is, with all of the federal funding that we've been seeing coming down, there's a number of projects that we know we're going to get federal funding for. And so we applied that federal funding to the project list for those. So Buffalo Pound is a good example where we're getting a large amount of federal funding and provincial or federal funding, and so that we needed to reduce those. So that's why the rates go up and down. The model has been set up, as Mr. Niebergall said, to do that. We will see periods of where the rate is higher, and sometimes we'll see it going down. So the last 2 years we've seen it going down, but in previous years it's always gone up. So that's why it goes up and down. So at this point, as we indicated, every year we go through this process, and because we also get new information as new engineering studies come in, that affects the model, because we have to look at the projects with the new information, and so that'll change the model as well. So in the report, it does indicate that we are recommending that the rate be reduced, but that the intensification levy rate remain unchanged. And the reason the intensification levy would not see the reduction is primarily the fact that there is one large project that's only attributed to the intensification levy projects. And because of that piece of infrastructure, it saw no change with respect to that rate specifically. If I could just note some of the things that were talked about. The density question has nothing to do with this policy. That has to do with our official community plan and what our goals are with respect to densities in these areas. So that question really needs to come when we brought the 5-year OCP review, and whether or not we want to see those things change within the official community plan. The design standards are another thing that actually doesn't have an effect on the servicing agreement policy per se with respect to sustainability and those sorts of things. Those are decisions about how we build those communities, specifically perhaps housing, street designs, those sorts of things. And then the intensification levy, as we indicated, we are doing work with respect to how do we promote the intensification of our core areas to meet the 30% target. But at this point, there is going to be further reports coming forward to council on where we would see the ability to put incentives in place. Because at the end of the day, as I said, it's either these fees get paid by the development community or they get paid by taxpayers. So we are going to bring a report forward in the future to talk about how do we promote intensification in our intensification areas in the city. So I know that was a long explanation, but it is, and I've said this before, I think I say it every time I bring this policy forward, it is one of the most complicated policies that council has because of how it's governed by the Planning and Development Act. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Very well explained. I think I have Mayor Fougere first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I did move concurrence in the report and just had a couple of comments. Pleased to see that this is here. And I have a couple of questions. There has been, as was stated previously, increases. Now we're seeing some decreases. given what we have before us here in your consultation with the housing and the development industry, is it safe to say that on the model, that the development community, the builders, are paying the right amount, not more, not less than what's required to build this regional infrastructure, if I use that term, away from their site? Is that accurate to say that?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor, you're absolutely correct. The model goes up and down, and we have to allow them to pay their fair share of what the project lists are.
Right. So it's really like a mathematical equation that is, so when you change your inputs and you put it through the equation, you have an output, which is at this point goes down to $2.99 for the development levy and the SAFs.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that is absolutely correct. It is a formula with assumptions, and I kind of outlined the assumptions that we used, and that was in collaboration with the industry and things that we've heard from industry and also council about how we put those assumptions into the model.
So if we accept the assumptions and we have the formula in place, that it's pretty self-evident what that would be, and it's not an arbitrary number that comes out of this. So a general sort of comment that I think this is really important that we accept this and provide a basis for competition and growth. And I think when I think of this, I'm thinking of post-COVID, when we see our economy hopefully moving forward soon, and we see an attraction of investment where we have a competitive rate. And not to be critical of the development outside the city, we have to be mindful of that there is in fact development happening in communities around the city that could easily be here. And if we have these rates that reflect the actual cost to the developer and owner, builder, if you will, based on this formula, that's all the more reason to accept this, that there's clarity and transparency in those numbers. So I'm really encouraged by this. I think it's good news. It sets the stage for competition and development, jobs created, investment, we really want to see happening here. The part that I'm still, and I understand with respect to infill and the intensification levy, we have the other shoe to drop here, which is the incentive side. And that needs to come forward quickly. We need to have that because we're not seeing development in the older areas of the city. We're just not seeing it. We know the 70-30 split is not, I think it's been close to attaining maybe 1 year since we've passed the OCP. And we need to, as a priority, find a way to encourage that development to take place, whether it's by a levy and then incentive, or looking at the levy as an approach to infill development. But we need to get that done, because not all development needs to be or should be or ought to be greenfield development. So I'm pleased. I think this is a nimble and responsive formula, and this is what I know the previous councils and I've talked about before. We need to have a system that reflects the market today, and will change, and will make changes again, so we don't have owners, developers paying for projects that will not even be on the list for 25 years. It is difficult for them to accept that as being part of their investment when I think we all agree that that's not part of a fair way to distribute those costs. So I'd urge members of council to support this and set the stage for post-COVID development, and certainly development even right now. So these numbers are very good, and Mr. Niebergall had mentioned this is very much supported by his industry for their growth as well. So I would ask members of council to support it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next up, we have Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Through the chair, getting a bit of feedback. Okay. My first comment actually is to the city manager and city clerk. For the new council, I would highly recommend a full day session on how this functions. It is incredibly important and complex. At the end of the day, there will be a quiz. I think it's imperative that we learn this early on in a council term. So first recommendation. Question. We always hear from the Home Builders Association, the word industry comes up a lot, Dream will come forward, Harvard will come forward, lobbyists come forward. who else is at the table when we discuss this policy and the costing. So for instance, do you bring forward organizations like the Saskatchewan Professional Planners Institute? Do you bring forward other community groups that actually have some knowledge about planning and city building? Or is it simply the same group that we see here today who are involved with the discussions at the table?
Ms. Ehrlich?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So it is an extensive list of people that we consult. With the policy, we consult the not-for-profits. We consult the groups that pay this fee. That's who needs to be part of it because the Act is very prescriptive. So the Planning Institute of Saskatchewan wouldn't be somebody that we would consult because they're not a stakeholder with respect to paying for it. And each policy in every city, the servicing agreement fees, as the mayor said, it's a mathematical formula based on the projects that we need as a city to build in order to support growth. So when we go through the policy, we do have an extensive list, and not all of the industry, so the development industry belongs to our HBA. So we do bring in and invite those people that are not part of that group to be part of the discussions. As I said, with the intensification, we have a list of developers that we know that build in the infill areas, and a large majority of the people that have built in those areas are not-for-profits. And so we have special sessions with those groups as well because it's their input that we're looking for with respect to that. As the mayor indicated, and I had noted before, bringing forward a report about how do we promote the intensification is very important. One of the things is it's not just about this fee, it's a bigger discussion about some of the barriers, and Mr. Niebergall has put forward a white paper that expresses some of those concerns, and administration knows some of it has to do with just what are the engineering studies that we need to do in order to understand what the infrastructure underground is for upgrades and things of that nature.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Diana. My other question, page 2, sorry, there's more feedback. The financial impact. And I need some help understanding this. So page 2 actually speaks to a deficit position in the SAF reserve fund. And that seems to be a serious financial issue, yet we're lowering the fee by nearly 20%. The section of the report also identifies the Eastern Pressure Solution, which addresses the water distribution problem in the East End. So how do we reconcile reducing the fees while also actually seeing a deficit in this fund and increased costs that might be associated with borrowing to actually finance this deficit? Through the chair.
Ms. Harlick?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I might start and then I will see if Mr. Lacey has any additional comments. You are correct. When the policy was approved by council back in 2015, it was agreed that the model will zero out at the end of its cycle. And so the model will see surpluses and deficits. And so council made a decision that the model could go to a $50 million deficit. And so that is worked into our overall financial models of the city. So there are going to be years where we will see actually surpluses quite significant. And then as projects come online and we have to draw down, that's when we might see it go into the deficit. But the way the model is set up is it does zero out at the end. You are correct. One of our largest projects is the water pressure project, and it's over $100 million. And that's going to be coming online here in the next few years, where we'll see a large drawdown in the model. As we said about assumptions, there's also risks. So with those assumptions, we take on some risks because, as the report indicates, if growth were to stop and we've taken out debt or advance monies through other means, and growth stops and we're not collecting that revenue, then we're seeing that risk in the sense of not being able to pay it back. One of the key things, though, is the way the model is set up. If we borrow, the money that we borrow for those projects is worked into the model, and the developers actually pay for the borrowing costs. So that's all worked into the model. And I think that's a really key point that sometimes is missed, is that the developers are actually paying for those borrowing costs. So it is a risk balance thing. And at this point, we feel that based on the current 21-year term and the longevity of this model and the risks that we're taking are considered to be lower risk and reasonable. But that's one of the reasons why we review this model on an annual basis, and we do the 5-year policy review, is to ensure that we're always aligned. And we work very closely with our financial partners in financial services as we work through this model. I'm not sure if Mr. Lacey has anything else to add. No? Okay.
Very helpful. Thank you so much. Through the chair, it's very clear, Diana, and you've done a really good job, I think, of explaining how this functions, that we can't overcharge or restrictions, and this is growth-related investment and fees. If we were to keep the status quo, would we be in a litigious position? In other words, could the industry really challenge us legally if we didn't change this? And I'm really trying to press these claims that if we don't lower this, there could be economic harm. If we didn't, and we just stayed the course and accumulated based on the current fee structure, would we be on the wrong side of the law, in simple terms, if we didn't adjust to compensate for changing costs in the near future?
Who do I have for that one? Ms. Harlow?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So you had we are bound by the Planning and Development Act. The one thing council can look at is the assumptions that we put into the model. We feel that they're fair, and we worked with industry with regards to those, and we're balancing risk. The Planning and Development Act is clear that developers can appeal decisions on the servicing agreement fees. And most recently, we have had one incident here in Saskatchewan where a municipality was overcharging servicing agreement fees. The developer took the municipality to court, and they lost, or pardon me, to the municipal board, and they lost, and they had to repay all those fees. Another municipality that just had that happen to was the city of Winnipeg. So the Planning and Development Act does prescribe mechanisms for the development industry to appeal the charges if they do not feel that they are being fairly applied.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Through the chair, one of the assumptions here is that expansion and infrastructure will become less expensive, or at least some of the contracts on road construction and so on is decreasing in price. That's just for the near future, correct? My understanding is in the long term, the costs are just going to go up, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So that is correct. We are seeing a decrease. So we have applied that factor to the projects. And as I've indicated, that's why we review it every year. So if we do see construction costs increasing, we adjust our numbers. So just so council understands the process and the residents that are listening, we review every project cost every year and adjust it accordingly. So that's why it's a very thorough model. And there's many areas of the city, Mr. Onright's area, myself, my division, and then working with financial services to ensure that the costs that are going into the model are accurately reflecting what we're seeing today and what we're projecting into the future.
Thank you. Through the chair, there are some claims made by the home builders about the market conditions, and that's certainly part of your assessment. We're seeing new projects come before council all the time. We're seeing home prices stagnant or decreasing. All of this tells me that the current fee structure really isn't an obstacle, and that's a bit of a distraction. And it seems like it's more a question of the margins being challenged rather than us actually creating obstacles with the current fee. What can you say about the economic circumstances here? And is there any evidence that the fees where they're at are actually obstacles to new growth?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there are many factors that go into development and why developers proceed with certain projects and not, and definitely fees come into play. We just ranked #1 on a benchmarking study, and that was one of the things that they actually look at is the fees that municipalities charge to go into affordability. I think right now we're seeing, as Mr. Niebergel said, a shift in the market, and we'll always see that. The market will adapt to what what the demand is in the marketplace. But at this point, as we indicated before, the way our fees are structured, I think are fair in the sense of it is a formula. We cannot charge more. We can charge less if we want, but then the taxpayers have to pick up that lessened part. But I think the way our other fees are structured, like building permits, planning permits, and those sorts of things, they're all based on cost recovery because the Act actually says that we cannot make money off of that. So sorry for the long answer, but it all comes into play for the development industry, and definitely they are going to look at their margins and those sorts of things, but they're going to adjust to the marketplace.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the project and costs, and it seems like transportation was a big issue, could we not then take this as an opportunity to improve and be a bit more ambitious in terms of those transportation projects? So for instance, that are growth related, more dedicated bus lanes, requiring all of that infrastructure to include protected bike lanes. So put another way, use the fees, if the costs are going down, to actually be more ambitious to achieve more of our targets in the TMP. So just change the formula, but the same assumptions, and invest in just better infrastructure rather than saying we should build the same things for less money.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So actually, the transportation projects are based on the projects that are outlined in the Transportation Master Plan, which outlines multimodal infrastructure. So what you're getting at is within those projects that are identified within the model already. As we get, so next year is actually the review of the Transportation Master Plan. So the fees and the projects will be adjusted once we have that review completed. But that is a very good point about this model. We get new studies, new engineering studies, new wastewater, water studies, and we adjust to what we need to see, what we require to be built. So in that case, if we're seeing things where we need to change the type of infrastructure, it's not always the same for same. We adjust the projects based on what the studies are indicating and what the needs are going forward. So everything that you've indicated would be accounted for within the projects.
Awesome, thank you. My final comment here is, as Stu said, that Greenfield is very inviting because it's cheap and easy. And I think we have an opportunity here to address the cheap question within the confines of what we're allowed to do. In terms of infill, I would hope that when administration comes back, and I look forward to reading the Home Builders White Paper, is that it's a capacity to depoliticize intensification and infill as well. And that means moving more towards permitted use away from discretionary, which is an issue I've heard. But I look forward to administration's work on that front. And thank you so much for going through this formula with me. That's all I have.
Thank you for that. Next up, we have Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is with regard to the intensification levy rate by land use type, number 2 in the report. And I'm going to make comments based on the fact that we need some incentives in that area, as the mayor pointed out. And I want to speak about the gap between needing to do incentives so that we have intensification where it's needed, and the issues that are at play in older neighborhoods. One of them is the drainage policy that we've asked for that has not come forward yet, because that has been a problem when infills have gone into those neighborhoods. And the second is the city has recognized the importance of neighborhood plans, and so they have a 5-year program to have neighborhood plans put in place, and part of those plans may be some infill overlay guidelines. So I see a possible gap here between having the incentives and infill development occurring without some of the appropriate infill guidelines in place in order to preserve neighborhoods and to make those infill safe so that drainage is not going to be a major issue. So could you comment on that, please?
Ms. Ehrlich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Young. There's a number of intersecting plans that need to come together. The drainage is one. I just was reading it this morning. It's coming to council on December 2nd, as per the council motion, or by December 2nd. So there's going to be a discussion for council on that. We are working on the neighborhood plans, and as you know from council's approval of the staggered approach, it is going to take a few years to go through all of those plans. And as I indicated, we are in the need of doing some engineering studies as part of that. As part of this review, there is an administrative component fee, as you can see in the report, and the home builders and the industry have agreed to fund 3 positions to look at growth-related infrastructure studies to help promote not only infill but greenfield development where we don't have the information. So it does all come together, and you're right. When we bring a report forward with respect to the intensification, it has to be very localized. Like, we want this area to develop, and we're going to put the intensification perhaps incentive in this area. It's kind of like the housing policy. That's kind of how I look at it. It's what do you want to incentivize and where to see an outcome. And so, to your point, you wouldn't want to see it everywhere because there's a lot of plans that have to be put in place first in order to know where we want to see intensification. Right now, though, we do have a downtown plan and we have an OCP that shows an area. It's the red area on your OCP growth map that we want to see the larger majority. We want to see 10,000 people in that red area. So that's going to be an area that we're going to want to focus on first, but that's exactly it. We need to kind of put a plan in place on where we want to see growth happen and then incentivize that to see that happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bresciani.
She's on mute.
Councillor Bresciani, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. I guess the question that comes up is, are projects going to be compromised because we are reducing the rate?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, the rates are, the projects that are going to get us to the 300,000 population. What we've looked at in the model is the costing of what those projects are and applied some assumptions. So we know that those are the projects that need to be done in order to meet the 300,000, 310,000 population. We call that our growth horizon. And then some of those projects will go to the next growth horizon. So when we looked at the project list and worked with industry, we really took a hard look at, one, what are all the projects that we need to deliver, and what projects would actually benefit the next growth horizon. So we're doing the policy. So the short answer is no. The policy moves and projects change, as I said, in the model based on new information that we get from other studies and those sorts of things. So it's a dynamic model, but at this point, no, it wouldn't change those major projects. But new projects could be added or other projects could be taken away based on new information. Okay.
Thank you for that. The list that was provided under the transportation projects, and when is there a priority, or is it they're prioritized when new information comes forward? Because when I looked at the one on Arcola, and I know there's going to be a study coming up in this next year on Arcola, after that study and the information that's collected, that would then, could be a priority to move it up on the chain for this. Is that accurate?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's absolutely right. This is a model where we put the projects in and we adjust projects based on the needs. And so they go hand in hand. The project list is the guide, but it's really your 5-year capital plan that's in the budget that tells us what's going to be built within the next 5 years. That list doesn't change as much. Sometimes it does because of new information, but that's how the model and our budgeting works. So some projects may be advanced quicker because of new information or needs, and others may be pushed out. So this is just the financial model, the calculation model, but then there's we take that to feed into our other information to create our 5-year, and ultimately we want to get to a 10-year capital planning process.
Thank you. So how does this work for people who have, I guess it probably, the Dreams and the Harvards that have maybe paid more money, like they've paid the higher rate? How is that adjusted now through the chair?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it doesn't get adjusted. The model is dynamic. It goes up and down. So the years that it's up, it's based on the assumptions and the project list at that time, and then the rates are paid. So people put in their, subdivision applications, and it's the policy and rate for that day and time is how it works. So the policy review is coming forward next year. So council will actually see recommendations for a new policy, but that is how it works. It's like when you buy a house. Sometimes you make money and sometimes you lose in that sense, and the model is the same. It's dynamic. It goes up and down.
Well, okay. So I want to be clear. You'd indicated, Diana, that this is the set rates and this is what it should be at. And because again, we are legal and bound to that. So, and I appreciate that information moving forward. Do you think that other cities as well are going to be doing the same then with the economy and the prices of construction? So would we be seeing this similar across Saskatchewan anyway, through the chair? Saskatoon?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I can't say. As I indicated, the servicing agreement fee models in every city that has the legislation to allow this have different assumptions and different projects within their models, because it's about how does that municipality, what infrastructure does that municipality need to grow? I would think and I would hope that they would be looking at the model to take into consideration, but it would be their own RHBA per se equivalent in those cities that will look and have those discussions. But as the Act says, they do have to reflect the costs that are associated with the infrastructure that needs to be built. So they do have to follow that.
Thank you. The last question I have is, and I asked Mr. Niverville this, is how do we ensure though that when we reduce the service agreement fees, when we talked about lot sizes and all that kind of stuff, we heard that they couldn't afford, they couldn't sell more lots because of the price. So we made them smaller, and that was due to the cost of building, but of course these service agreement fees. So how are we going to monitor this as a city that those are passed on down to, I guess it'd be a home builder, that kind of thing, through the chair?
Excuse me. Through you, Mr. Chairman, we cannot. We set the fees, and we don't have an ability to increase them. As we said, the fees have to be set as per the legislation. We put assumptions into those, and council can look at those assumptions if they don't agree, and we can go back and look at those, but the fees are the fees. When it comes to how they pass those along, that's, again, the decision of the home builder, the developer, but we would hope that we would see that, because if all the fees are going down, and what can the market bear will determine the ultimate prices. But we cannot legislate that the fees went down by 17.2%, therefore housing prices have to go down by 17.2%. There's too many factors when you look at the costs of housing. As Mr. Niebergel said, lumber prices have gone up. So this is just one component into the full costs of housing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that I'm thinking of the young family that wants to purchase a home. If it's, could be cheaper for them in this regard. I mean, that's what we want, and it would be economic development as well. I see that as well as a benefit. Just the last question on density, and through the chair, you'd indicated that density. This is not the part of the conversation, and it really is not in regards to service agreement fees. But when we're talking about the 50 people per hectare and the density, aren't the costs on bigger pipes because of the density? Like, isn't that a part of the costing, through the chair?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So definitely when we look at overall, like a subdivision, that's not going to change our major infrastructure. You have to remember these are the big pipes, the big infrastructure that needs to get us to the 300,000 population. So that's not going to change. The density, it is a conversation about the official community plan and how you want to see neighborhoods develop. Like I said, that's a separate conversation from this conversation. This is the conversation on how we're going to get to the 300,000 population. What you're talking about is what type of housing and density would get us there. So if you lower the density, then it'll take up more land, which means a lot more pipe length, more road pipes, all of those things. That's a different conversation with respect to how we want to see, and that's embedded within the OCP. So that's definitely a conversation we can have, with council, whether or not you want to see that and what the pros and cons are with respect to increasing or decreasing the minimum density requirements.
Okay, good. I'll leave it there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councillor Fundera, you're up next.
Okay, just 1 second here. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Question to the administration, just going through the model summary of the transportation projects, and I believe I heard discussion about the how they applied. I'm looking at and the discussion was and the talk is in the report about the community needs, and that's where the money is coming from. I'm specifically looking at Prince of Wales, the twinning Dudney Avenue, from Dudney Avenue to Jenkins, and then twinning from Jenkins to Highway 46. And there's some funds in here. How does that? And the conversation was about this has been added to the capital projects already. Can I get a little bit of a explanation of how this works?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So the lists that you see in the Appendix A are the list of projects that'll get us to the, like I said, the 310,000 population. That specific project, as it indicates, the total cost for the number 54 is $3.4 million. We did do a cost reduction based on construction costs, and it's 100% SAF funded. So that's how it's in the model. The timing of it would come at the budget process, and we would determine at that time which projects are going to be in the 5-year and 10-year capital projects. So I don't have that. I'm not sure, Mr. Barnhart, do you know if number 54 and 57 are within the construction program in the 5-year?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, through the chair. No, I don't have that information. Sorry.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, we could find that information out, but the way it works, Councillor Finder, is, as I said, this is the list, and then we allocate those projects based on timing of the need, and they can move up and down, but it's within the really the budgeting process. Our 5-year capital, those are the projects that council is approving to move forward.
Okay, thank you. So I could get some information then from this?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we can tell you, I'll follow up with you on those 2 specific projects and the timing.
Okay. Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, I have a couple of my own. I note the 5-year review of the SAF policies in progress. Just thinking out loud with the current circumstances of COVID and trying to be successful, are we going to encapsulate enough information on the changes that happen in our community due to COVID in the time frame that this review is going through?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So we are in the midst of looking at the policy. So if you mean the impacts it has to construction costs, is that what you're specific?
I guess impacts it has to construction costs, impacts it has to society's expectations somewhat, and how that lays out into the future. So if things have changed due to the current circumstance and we're in the process of change and reviewing at the same time, is there any adjustments to the review time frame to have the most impact for its results, to have the most success outcomes?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So at this point, we'd be bringing a report forward in April. So I think at this point, the policy, we would look to see if there is any impacts at this point. But the policy gets reviewed every 5 years, but it can be reviewed sooner if we think that there's some significant changes within the city that would require us to look at it. The policy is very high level. It really determines how we feed into this policy in terms of the calculations, what's eligible, what's not, those sorts of things. So definitely we will look at those sorts of like what's happening right now and look at that when we bring the review forward. But it's always open for changes sooner than the 5 years.
Thank you. Follow-up question. There's a comment in the report about changes that may result from reviews of the TMP, the Transportation Master Plan, and impact to the bypass. Can you comment on that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So as part of the review, and as I've indicated, we get new studies, new information all the time. And so when we get that, we adjust the model based on that new information. So the TMP, as I indicated, is the primary document that feeds the transportation project list. And so with the 5-year review, we will definitely see some changes, I would suspect, with respect to the project lists that were created 5 years ago when we approved the TMP. And then the bypass, as Councillor Bresciani indicated, there is that review of how has the bypass impacted our transportation systems. So once we get that report, then we'll see if any adjustments need to be made with respect to the project list and then timing of projects.
Thank you for that. Just a comment. I really appreciated administration's decision to apply government funding to address some of the problems that also have impact on these fees. In that vein of thought and discussion, I'd also like to think that this would be a great tool to help the infill development move forward as well. So really, really appreciate that thought behind making it all work more than once. So thank you. Okay. With no other speakers, I guess I'll call a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will begin with the mayor as he moved the motion. Councillor Flagel. Councillor Flagel. Councillor O'Donnell.
Yes.
In favor.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I have Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Bryce.
In favor.
Councillor Murray. Councillor Findura.
In favor.
Councillor Bresciani.
In favor.
Councillor Stevens.
Opposed.
Councillor Hawkins.
In favor.
Councillor Young.
In favor.
Councillor Mancinelli.
In favor.
Carries 10-1, Mr. Chair.
And
Resolution for private session?
so move. Any opposed? Resolution carried. I guess we'll adjourn for 10 minutes while we get ready for private session.